Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are reviewing Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's epic western crime drama starring Leo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro and Lily Gladstone. It's a film that's debuted to absolute rave reviews, 5-star reviews across the board. It's being hailed as a masterpiece, it's being hailed as Leo DiCaprio's best performance, and it was definitely one of my most anticipated films of the year going in. And having watched it now, I have to say that I didn't love it. I really wanted to love it. I really tried to kind of think about it afterwards and digest it with different mindsets, different perspectives. But no matter how hard I look back on it, I just don't think it came together with the emotional impact that was intended, because there's been a lot of talk about how this film was kind of rewritten, reworked and reshaped to focus more on the Osage community and telling their story and putting their perspective more at the forefront of this narrative. And for me, that really didn't come across in this film. And I think ultimately to land this film with the kind of emotional resonance that they wanted to, I think this story needed to be told probably from Molly's perspective more than Leonardo DiCaprio's. Because I think the biggest letdown in this film is how sidelined and how marginalized this community feel in the narrative itself. Now, being a Scorsese film, everything is deliberate. That could have been deliberate to emphasize and reflect the alienation that this community started to face and the oppression that they started to feel. But I think in the framework of the story, these characters in this community deserve so much more screen time than what they did get. Because even though it depicts a lot of customs, a lot of ceremonial practice, and it digs a bit deeper into explaining the kind of historical context, the reason why they came to wealth, the reason why everyone else wanted to take it from them, I don't think the film gives the characters enough screen time to grow as individuals. I don't think the film delves into or develops the relationship between the Osage characters enough to make their deaths in the film impactful. You know it's wrong and you know it's brutal, but that's coming from your own moral conscience going into the film. The film doesn't do enough to make you really emotionally invest in these characters as they get bumped off along the way. Not in the least because these are very close friends and family members to Molly, played by Lily Gladstone, and to kind of really understand her grief and her emotional turmoil and her sense of loneliness and complete abandonment in this environment, you really needed to buy into those relationships. You really needed to feel the emotional loss, and you don't because the narrative doesn't commit much time to them. Instead, what we get a lot of is Ernest's journey, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, his introduction into this new environment after being discharged from the war, the way he's manipulated by his uncle, played by Robert De Niro, and the way he then subsequently goes on to manipulate Molly and the people in her community. And then for the most part, you know, the last couple of hours of the film is really devoted to these little conspiracies to commit murder, these murders going a bit awry or not going quite to plan, the investigations into these murders. And to me, that's just, it's interesting, but it's not justifiable for a 3.5-hour film. I don't think the narrative ever quite captures the urgency and necessity that you would need to bulk out and bloat out a film by that much, especially if you're focusing on what I think was the wrong kind of story arc in the film. Ernest is an incredibly complex and compelling character, but it just becomes a bit frustrating when you see how much Molly is sidelined, particularly in the latter half of the film. I thought the first hour and a half was masterful. You know, the way it kind of slowly establishes this tribe, the way it slowly introduces Leo DiCaprio into this environment, the way that you see their relationship slowly and incrementally start to build, it felt equally weighted. It felt like this was a two-hander. And the slow burn really paid off and worked in that kind of development of that relationship, and teasing tonally that things weren't quite what they seemed, that there was a darkness underlying a lot of the characters. So that for me, the second half, it really kind of stagnated, and I don't think the tension ramped, and I don't think the catharsis really paid off. There are some incredibly expressive scenes between Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone, particularly towards the end of the film and the truth starts getting unraveled. And, you know, these are two incredible actors at the top of their game, and it was a real beauty to watch. So I think all the individual faculties of this film were stunning. The acting was incredible, the cinematography was beautiful. The score, or lack of it, I think was detrimental to the pacing, but I think it really helped hammer home the vastness and the desolation of the space. I think the production design really did a good job at capturing that as well, this kind of like vast expansive space, but this very intimate claustrophobic environment with this community. So I think for me, the reason it didn't land was ultimately in the story and the viewpoints that the story chose to focus on. It was a slow burn, it was deliberately and conscientiously a slow burn, But I think when you're doing a slow burn and focusing on one story at the expense of another, it doesn't necessarily feel like the right choice to have made. Still, it is absolutely a story that needed to be told. I think in the hands of a masterful director like Scorsese, you know you're going to get something interesting and riveting to watch, which it definitely was. I just don't think I had an emotional connection with this film. Even the trial period and the injustices that come from that towards the end of the film, it feels like we skim over really kind of compelling narrative chunks. There was one fantastic scene in that courtroom where the camera just stays on Leonardo DiCaprio in kind of close up for about 5 minutes, and we kind of witness his reaction, we witness his testimony, and that was really beautiful stuff. And an example of them really kind of mining the gold from the moment, but I'm not sure that happens a lot in this film. Molly and Ernest start a family. You kind of really spend no time delving into that element or the fact they have children, which means things that happen later on don't land with any emotional impact either. There was a frustrating disjointedness to the film, I think. Despite spanning 3.5 hours and feeling like there was plenty of room to tuck into a lot of these different elements, it felt like the narrative was very kind of streamlined on one perspective, and that was telling the story from Leonardo DiCaprio's perspective, for better and for worse. But it is a film that is absolutely worth watching for the acting, for the technical mastery, for the visuals, for the story, because, the story is ultimately what's being told. And I think the end of the film really kind of hammers home and brings it back to that focus, which it slightly loses throughout. But yeah, contrary to popular opinion, it seems, I wasn't the biggest fan of Killers of the Flower Moon. It just didn't quite gel together for me at the end. I can appreciate it, I did enjoy it, but I definitely didn't love it. But that is just my opinion. I would love to hear yours, so please drop a comment below if you have seen the film and let me know what you thought. Please also consider liking and subscribing to the channel. That is always a huge help for me, guys. And in the meantime, we will see you for the next vid.